Well, welcome to all our listeners out there worldwide. I hope you're having a good day, the same as we are here in sunny UK. I say it's sunny, believe me, it's overcast and raining, but we get used to that here. Right, onwards. This is a new series of programmes between Living with Diabetes and Spectrum on Air, global radio station, and based on what we see so far, we've got an exciting set of programmes for you. We'll be broadcasting to start with each month. That's once a month. So the second show will be 1 month from today. So welcome to the first edition. My name is Stuart Moore and I'll be hosting. So anything that goes wrong is down to me and not my guests. Okay, now we're going to be looking at the world of diabetes. What can we say? 4.5 million people odd in the UK suffer from it. Globally, it's a major problem. It's classified, I believe, as a chronic disease. And things we'll be discussing will be things like nutrition, well-being, how you live your lifestyle, how you can live a good, active life while suffering from diabetes. But hey, I'm not a medical person. I'm just Joe. Remember, all right, our expert guests on this evening's show, who I'll get them to introduce themselves in a minute, have a lot of experience in this field. And I think we're going to have an interesting conversation. What I would say at this point, though, this is anything that we discuss tonight is not to be taken as medical advice. All right, we're having a conversation. I've got a couple of experts here lined up to talk to you, and I'm going to ask them what I think are good questions and what people want to know. During the program, I will stand corrected because no doubt I will not get it all right. Right, enough from me. Guests first. Ladies, I think, are the major. I'm still old-fashioned in that way, so I have with me Dr. Rebecca Hiscutt, PhD. I'm impressed already. Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for having me this evening. So I am a registered dietitian with a doctorate in nutrition, specialising in metabolic health. So I work at Coombe Grove, which is a centre for metabolic health. And, there we support clients both with type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes.
Okay, and obviously, as we'll get through a little bit further in the programme, if I've done my questions and my research right, nutrition is a very, very important part of people that suffer from this disease. Yep. Yeah,
absolutely. It's fundamental, really, in helping people with diabetes have that stability, which makes their daily life easier and helps with their health. So yeah, it's absolutely core.
Okay, that's great. Now, my second guest this evening, and thank goodness he's joined me, otherwise I would really have been up the Swanee without a panel, is Dr. Ian Lake. Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Stuart. Thank you for inviting me on. Yes, my name's Ian Lake. I'm a GP in Gloucestershire, and I look after people with all types of diabetes, type 2, type 1, and other minor, sort of more rare types. And I have type 1 diabetes myself, which I've had for 30 years. And I manage it in a way that helps me to get good control at all times. But I do manage all types of diabetes.
Okay, quick question for you here is, how does a doctor wind up with type 1 diabetes? I mean, what's the difference between type 1 and type 2?
Okay, well, type 1 diabetes is a condition we don't really understand the origin of. So type 1 diabetes has sort of peaks in childhood and teenage years, but also happens in adults as well. Yep. We think it's a disease of something called autoimmunity, where the body fails to recognize certain foods or viruses or whatever and attacks its own system. So reduces the ability of your body to produce its own insulin, which is the hormone which is deficient in type 1 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is characterized by a lack of the ability to produce insulin. And the problem with that is that insulin is the major energy regulating hormone in the body. And so people with type 1 have to inject insulin into the skin. The reason we can't take it as a tablet is because insulin is a hormone which is effectively a protein, and it would get dissolved by the stomach acids if we took it as a tablet. So insulin has to be injected into the skin in type 1 diabetes because people with type 1 diabetes cannot produce their own insulin. This contrasts with type 2 diabetes, which is the commonest type of diabetes by far. 90% of the people in the world with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. And this is conditioned really of less than ideal fueling of the body. So the body is unable to handle the fuels that we eat effectively. So in type 2 diabetes, rather than having no insulin at all, you tend to have more insulin produced, but the body is resistant to that insulin that's produced. So type 2 diabetes is a condition where people have more insulin than necessary, and it's often driven by the sorts of food that we eat. So the current dietary recommendations are that we eat about half of our food as something called carbohydrates, which are effectively sugars or starches such as pasta, rice, bread, potatoes, crisps, cakes, chocolate, etc.
Well, hang on, let me, if I may, sorry to interrupt you, if I may, let me bring Rebecca into this, right? Because I'm a great believer in the fact that being a bit tubby and overweight, I'm the first to put my hands up about that, is that all the good food out there, right, doesn't seem to help me. I mean, it doesn't taste good. The bad food is good for you, and the good food is bad for you. Things like burgers. Rebecca, what sort of a limit should we be putting on this thing? I think when it comes to eating, I mean, who's going to give up their curries and their, I don't know, their Chinese and their burgers? I mean, you know.
The key is, Stuart, is sort of is not having to give up foods. It's looking at it, reframing it, finding the foods that you love that help you feel good and allow you to live the life you want to. So, you know, a lot of the things you said are things that you can absolutely have, which are going to really nourish you. So curries, for example, amazing. You know, things like burgers or, you know, a steak, absolutely. So I think it's looking for the opportunities for food that you're going to love. You don't have to eat the things you don't enjoy, because there are so many amazing, you know, whole foods that help us feel good. So I think a lot of it is reframing. And the other really important thing...
Hang on. By reframing, do you mean taking, say, in moderation under a planned diet?
No, I don't mean in moderation. I mean in thinking about it differently. And I think it's really important. So thinking about food differently and thinking about what food does for you, what it allows you to do, and looking for those foods that make you feel amazing rather than seeing the foods that you feel like you shouldn't be eating much of. And then it can be limitless and the foods can be amazing. And it's surrounding yourself as well with people who give you great creative ideas and are eating the same way and are sharing delicious food and making it easy. I think that's key, because what we tend to do is be surrounded by food that, like you say, is everywhere, isn't it? The food that maybe people want to eat but doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I was always taught that, you know, you enjoy a meal 3 times: ordering it and anticipation, eating it, and remembering it afterwards. I mean, I've been like that for years, hence my shape, size, and everything else like that. We won't go into that. Ian, let me switch back to you, okay? What are the most common misconceptions about type 1 diabetes that you come across, you know, as a doctor, and how do you address them?
Well, the thing about type 1 diabetes is we have to inject insulin, and there are 3 main common misconceptions about type 1 diabetes. The first is that there's a condition called diabetic ketoacidosis, which
Pardon?
Called diabetic.
Listen, when I was marketing this program, I promised everybody that it wouldn't be full of technical jargon. No. Just run that past me one more time.
This is a condition where the body doesn't have enough insulin and people end up burning fat in a runaway situation, which makes them very, very ill indeed.
That I understand.
Several people with type 1 at presentation, when they first diagnosed, end up in what's called diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. And it's thought that DKA, I mean, it's a big risk factor, and the sort of diet that I'm on, which is a low carbohydrate diet for my condition, produces what's called ketones, the K in DKA. But For me, it isn't dangerous, but there's a misconception is that if I'm on a specific therapeutic diet for type 1 diabetes, it may make me a more risk of serious complications, which it doesn't. The second problem is that people feel that you need sugar for energy, and that isn't actually the case. Your body can fuel quite adequately on other fuels other than sugar. But the way we're managing type 1 and type 2 diabetes at the moment means that we are consuming more sugar than is ideal for our condition. And that applies for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes is made worse by the fuel called carbohydrate, which, as I said, is all of the things you like, Stuart.
To be fair, me and a lot of other people.
You and a lot of other. And type 2 diabetes is equally made worse by those same sorts of foods, because people who are vulnerable to type 2 diabetes, and that's about 8% of the population, and another few percent have something called pre-diabetes, which is part of the same condition but hasn't advanced as much at this moment in time. People with those situations are not able to handle carbohydrates or sugary or starchy foods, as well as people who don't have diabetes. So for them, it requires a dietary shift in order to help their condition. So it's not just about tablets, it's about a dietary shift, which I would call therapeutic nutrition. So it isn't a case of eating what you like and covering it with medication. Your nutrition is a driver of your disease in type 2 diabetes, and it is not helping your disease in type 1 diabetes.
Okay, am I right in assuming here, this is to the pair of you, that the old saying that to have sugar gives you energy, does give you energy. So, Rebecca, what would be your top tips to help your blood sugar be controlled?
So,
I mean, I've cut out sugar in my tea and coffee. Make no difference to me whatsoever.
Yeah. So nutrition is core, but thinking about the other things we'll come to in a minute. But in terms of nutrition, thinking about using protein, prioritizing protein to help give you stability and balance. It's
all right. So give me 3 or 4 protein things that we should.
Yeah. Meat, fish, eggs, nuts, dairy foods can all be good protein. And then also making use of fats, healthy, natural fats. And people sort of, there's very much a misconception, but fats are amazing for giving long-lasting energy and for providing stability. Particularly for people who are trying to keep their blood sugar levels stable, fats can be super helpful. So fats and protein are really helpful. Also thinking about...
Well, I should be doing all right then.
the thing is, what
Ian, she called me fat. When she said fat, she looked directly at me. Sorry, Rebecca, go on.
The thing is that with foods that are produced, processed foods, they put the fat with the sugar or the carbohydrate. That's how it is. You're getting both at once. And then what happens then is your body has to produce insulin in order to deal with the carbohydrates of sugar. So what we're talking about is using fats in their natural form and not having them in combination with processed carbohydrates. And when you do that, your body responds in a very different way and creates balance.
Okay, all right, I can go on that. I can go on that, but I want to switch back to Ian at the time. Ian, when you found out, you said about 30 years ago, like people do every day, that you are type 1 or type 2, I can imagine that it's quite an emotional upheaval for them. And the immediate thing is scared, chronic disease, scared. How did you get through that?
Well, it's a difficult condition to be diagnosed with, because instantly you have limitations on your lifestyle because of the need to inject insulin and because of the need to be careful with the food you eat. So they're the main impositions. I mean, people with type 1 diabetes can do what they like. People with type 1 diabetes fly airplanes now. They're allowed to be pilots. That they can climb Everest. You can do anything you want with type 1 diabetes. But the key thing is thinking about trying to get good blood sugar control every single day, because people with type 1 diabetes have to make decisions all the time when they're either doing physical activity or when they're eating or when they're in an office situation and when they're sleeping at night. Because we inject insulin, one of the functions of insulin is to drop blood sugar. So if we don't have adequate food, basically, that raises our blood sugar, we then are vulnerable to something called hypos, and that's a low blood sugar.
Yeah, I've heard of those, yeah.
Very serious in that you become confused, sometimes get aggressive, sometimes you can have a headache, sometimes you can start sweating, and some people lose consciousness and have to be resuscitated. So the fear of hypos is quite common in type 1 diabetes, because you always have to look out for it. So that's what I call an acute or an immediate complication that could happen to us. It could happen to me right now in this conversation, although it won't. But you'll be
Goodness.
And then, of course, for type 1, there's the long-term complications of continual poor control of your diabetes, where people end up, and it's the same for type 2, with continual high blood sugar levels and what I call relatively high insulin levels, which is which happens in type 2 diabetes. And also, because of the way we treat type 1 diabetes, we tend to have higher insulin levels in our bodies. And those levels of high sugar and high insulin can combine to cause the recognized long-term complications of diabetes, such as heart disease, strokes, blindness, kidney disease, neuropathy.
I'm getting nearly depressed.
Very depressed. Well, that's what it's like when you're first diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes.
Yes. So hey, for our listener out there, can you give us some top tips about how to help your blood sugar level control?
Yeah, well, the key thing is to understand that it is possible to get good control without medication. You may need medication in type 2 diabetes, but you certainly will need medication in type 1 diabetes. But within that, it's not. Unfortunately, what happens is that the message in type 1 diabetes seems to be that, you can eat the same as everyone else because we have really good rapid-acting insulins, we have pumps, we have what I call hybrid loops, which are pumps and sensors which almost mimic a pancreas, and therefore you can eat what you like and get away with it. My view is that isn't ideal, because it's very difficult to get good blood sugar control without being strict with your diet. So I call it targeted therapeutic nutrition. So you have to realize that nutrition does impact on type 1 diabetes, and you need more than just insulin injections, but you need to take care of your diet. In type 2 diabetes, changing your diet to suit your own metabolic profile, your own personal, the way your body works, for you personally, tweaking it so that you get the optimal nutrition for your body. Most people with early diabetes and the very early stages of diabetes can come out of having diabetes completely just by changing their diet alone.
Okay, so the diet comes into a lot of different aspects, and Rebecca, that's more your specialist market than anything else.
Yeah.
So you mentioned at the top of the program that you were at the Coombe Grove, which is a charitable foundation. Mm-hmm. And what you do there is, I've got the screen come up, what you do there is advise on all this nutrition, how to live, lifestyle and well-being, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. So nutrition is definitely our core route. We spend a lot of time talking about that, but really trying to make it practical for people. So we do cooking demos and really trying to help people see how they could do it every day and make it sustainable. But nutrition on its own won't give you the best results. So what you really need to do is think about the other things. So you need to think about movement. Sleep is really important and has a really big impact on blood sugar levels. Yeah. Mindset and environment. So we look at all of these because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not thinking in the right way, or if you're struggling with the motivation, or if you're struggling with stress, which is so common, then it's going to be really, really hard to carry out and look after yourself every day. So that's what we do, Ian and I, on the Type 1 program, is make sure that everyone knows about all of these routes so they understand how they can help themselves have a really good restorative sleep. And if you sleep well, your blood sugar levels are going to be more stable the next day. So
and sleeping well, does that mean going to bed at a reasonable time and getting your 8 hours or whatever it is on a regular basis?
It's a really good question. It depends on the individual. So for some people, depends where they are. For some people, they would like to sleep through the night. So it's about sort of having that, length of sleep, not waking up or waking up multiple times. What we try and talk about is giving yourself the opportunity to have a good night's sleep, because then you're not adding to the pressure. If you say you need to sleep 8 hours a night, then suddenly people are worrying about having that sleep, which only adds to it. Whereas if you say, give yourself the opportunity to have a good night's sleep, give yourself that time to have a good night's sleep, it changes things. And we do not want to add to people's stress and worry about any of this.
Yeah, I can appreciate it. Listen, guys, I'll give you a bit of a break because I've been hammering you now for 25 minutes. So I think you deserve a bit of break from me. I'm going to put a track on just to give us all chance to rest. The first choice of music I've got up, I don't know which one of you two is going to own up to this, but it was the Wurzels.
That's me, Stuart.
And Combine Harvest. Oh, that's you, is it?
Yeah, I'm a farmer's daughter, so I grew up with the Wurzels.
Okay, so I've got on Combine Harvester here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I was dancing to this at my wedding with my brothers and my dad, and it's got amazing memories for me.
Oh, okay. So we'll play it now, and we'll be back with the second part of the show, the second 20 minutes, after we played this for Rebecca and all her memories.
Thank you.
I drove my tractor through your haystack last night. I threw me pitchfork at your dog to keep quiet. Now something's telling me that you avoiding me. Come on now, darling, you got something I need. 'Cause I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Come on now, let's get together in perfect harmony. I got 20 acres and you got 43. Now I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. She made I laugh. I'll stick by you, I'll give you all that you need. We'll have twins and triplets, I'm a man built for speed. And you know I'll love you, darling, so give me your hand. The thing I want the most is all the acres of land. 'Cause I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Come on now, let's get together in perfect harmony. I got 20 acres and you've got 43. Now I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Oh, she's a lovely bit of stuff and all. For 7 long years I've been alone in this place. Ain't sleep in the kitchen, it's a proper disgrace. Now if I cleaned it up, would you change your mind? I'll give up drinking Scrumpy and that larder and lime. 'Cause I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Come on now, let's get together in perfect harmony. I got 20 acres and you've got 43. Now I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Who loves you, baby? When we grand couple at that last Wurzel dance, I wore brand new gaiters and me corduroy pants. In your new Sunday dress with your perfume smelling grand, we had our photos taken us sold in end. Now I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. Now that we both past our 50s, I think that you and me should stop this gallivanting and will you marry me? 'Cause I got a brand new combine harvester and I'll give you the key. You're a fine looking woman and I can't wait to get my hands on your land.
Well, I've got to say, that was a bit out of the blue for me. It's I've heard of the Wurzels, but listening to the music of that, you got married and danced to that, Rebecca?
Yeah. Did you enjoy it, Stuart?
Yeah, I thought it was quite good, actually. Play on words, I know. Yeah, quite good. I enjoyed it. Obviously, a comedy group. I'll have to look them up on the system and play a few more. So I'm sure there's plenty like that. But yeah.
There are, yeah.
Now, before we went away, we were talking about well-being and nutritional diets with you, Rebecca. I just want to expand that a little bit. Okay. I think the big problem you have when we're trying to control blood sugar levels, all right, you have to make some serious lifestyle changes. All right.
Yes.
You can't mess around. It's either going to be done properly or it's not going to be done at all. Right. How do people handle the emotional side of that?
I think the big thing is being really clear on your why. Why do you want to make these changes? What difference is it going to make to you? How are you going to feel in 3 months' time if you make these changes?
Yeah.
What's it going to allow you to do? If you're really, really clear on why you're doing this, that's going to help drive you. So I think that's fundamental.
Okay, and is there any information out there, I don't know, from your local doctor or the government or websites that we can get information about handling that kind of illness, part of the illness?
Yeah, so it depends if someone's got type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So Ian has got a wealth of information about type 1 on his website that you can have a look at. On Coombe Grove website as well, you can find further information about 2. There's some incredible resources available as well, particularly if you want to be inspired around nutrition, food ideas. So there's a really nice couple of really nice books I'd recommend. So one that's written by our friend Emma Porter, that's a low carb cookbook for diabetes, and that's a fabulous resource. There's other cookbooks written by Katie and Giancarlo Caldisi. And this is really interesting because Giancarlo is an Italian chef. So obviously loves his pasta, loves his pizza. Yeah, absolutely. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and he put that into remission, despite obviously running a restaurant, being a chef, being surrounded by food. So their books sort of share some of the wonderful and really exciting dishes that they eat. And what they do is actually showing you that actually you can eat all the things that people might find difficult not to eat. So if people want to, you don't have to, but if people want to, make an alternative to bread, for example, or pizza, they can. So their books, and there's a lot of them, are a really helpful resource as well. Okay, that's good to know. We will find out where we can find them a little bit later on in the programme. But Ian, let me bring you back in. Can you tell us a little bit about the insulin optimization approach for type 1 and how this differs from what they call the standard care?
Yeah, so they sort of complement each other to some degree, but standard care doesn't really emphasize the other aspects of managing type 1.
Right. How do we identify standard care? Can you put it into a sentence?
Yeah, thank you. Well, standard care comes from the NICE, the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence guidelines, which is based around the notion that people with type 1 within reason can eat the same sort of food as people with not type 1. And that's a historical sort of concept from the 1980s when insulin pens became available and new types of insulin became available. So people with type 1 were not as restricted to the timing of their eating in those days. So because of the guidelines that suggested then that low-fat diets were quite helpful to prevent heart disease, and people with type 1 diabetes and type 2 get up to 3 times increased risk of heart disease as a result of their condition, it was that people with type 1 should eat the same as people without type 1, now that the modern insulins gave them flexibility to eat when they wanted. And subsequently that has become distorted a little bit in my view to eat what you want, as well as eat when you want, and try to eat as healthily as you can. The approach that I use is recognizing that insulin is a very important hormone, not just in managing blood sugar through diet, but also managing blood sugar through the other what we call roots of health, such as stress, which is a big raiser of blood sugar, poor sleep, which can raise blood sugar. We need to understand how insulin operates in physical activity, because it can put it up or bring it down. Mostly it brings it down, but it can put it up as well. So we need to be able to identify all of those lifestyle all those lifestyle routes that affect our blood insulin, and then we need to work with our insulin and understand how insulin works in order to ensure that when we are sleeping, we maximize our sleep potential to reduce the amount of insulin we need, because there's a tendency in type 1 to have too much insulin in our bodies, and that tends to lead to us having more vulnerability to low sugars, or what I call hypos. And the approach that we use, there's good evidence to suggest that it reduces hypos up to a factor of 6-fold if you actually understand insulin and manage it in a way. I always say as much as you need, but as little as possible. So it's not.
Yeah, I remember reading that. I thought that makes an awful lot of sense.
It's not a matter of racing to the bottom, and people with type 1 are never going to, as far as we know, never going to stop using insulin. But I think you can modify the use of it to make the best of your chances by not just managing your diet, but also managing other aspects of your lifestyle. So I teach insulin optimization, and what that does is give our bodies what I'd call, this is not that technical, it's metabolic flexibility. So it sounds technical, I'll explain it. So our bodies can use several different fuels for energy. So we can use fat and we can use sugar. And one of the breakdowns of fat is called a ketone body. And our brains sometimes prefer ketone bodies over and above sugar, but they need sugar as well. But you don't have to eat sugar in order to make it. So our body will make more than enough sugar for our needs by us just using protein and fat and a little bit of carbohydrate for our diet. So if you don't have type 1 diabetes, and if you cut down your carbohydrates, you make your body what I call metabolically flexible. So it can choose to eat sugar, it can choose to eat fat, it can choose to use sugar for energy, it can use fat for energy, or ketones for energy. And because ketones are good for brain fuel, people with migraines especially, and some mental health conditions, do very well by accessing ketone bodies, which is a result of fat burning. The current guideline way of managing insulin is to prevent fat burning in our body. So we're relying on sugar alone for our energy. And we do know that the body is a multi-fuel system. It just it uses ketones, it uses fats, it uses glucose. And the method of insulin optimization allows our body to choose which fuels it uses, whereas the standard method tries to suppress as fat burning, because of this idea we talked about earlier, diabetic ketoacidosis. It's worried that it might lead on to that, which it doesn't. So that's an approach. Okay.
Question I'd like to ask both you, Rebecca, if you could kick us off with this one, is having, or an admission of having diabetes of any kind, one or two, a bit of a stigma out there in the marketplace? I mean, I know it's not as bad as admitting you're having several other Ds, but there's a misconception about it out there in the market. This out in the public. There's no doubt about that. I've been speaking to people about it, and I wonder if you've ever come across any experience of people being more or less labelled as stigma, all right, in your personal or your professional life, and if it is, or people do think that, how do you address those situations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to talk about. I think that's changed hugely. And I think now there's growing awareness that, for example, type 2 diabetes is our body's response to trying to live in an environment that doesn't suit us. So it's not anyone's personal responsibility. It's the fact that we are set up in this world where we are surrounded by food everywhere, and it's food that our bodies do not recognize and do not suit. And we're in a 24/7 environment. So, we're switched on all the time. We're, not prioritizing sleep. We're encouraged to sit and work long hours. So all of these things. So I think there's very much people are recognizing that's what's happening, and that's why our bodies are struggling, becoming insulin resistant. Type 2 diabetes is increasing. In terms of, what was the second bit of your question, Stuart?
How do you handle it? Have you experienced it? How do people handle it?
Yeah, really good. So I think
it's not like having an STD, is it? You wouldn't admit that.
No, it's definitely not. I think the key is talking about it. That it's talking about it, being open, sharing, and being surrounded by other people who understand. And I think that is really a lovely part of what I love doing about where I work at Coombe Grove, is that we provide this community. People come together. They have a lovely group of people who truly understand what situation they're in, and they can share experiences. And then they stay with each other for a year, and then they're lifelong friends. That's one of the key things people get, that they have this friendship, this reassurance. And I think that's what can feel really lonely. You know, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, it's, you know, do your friends, does everyone around you understand, and can you ask them the questions that are on your mind? You know, you need a network of people that get it, and you just don't have to explain yourself.
Okay, Ian, as a GP, right, as a doctor, do you find any of your patients that come to your surgery or wherever they come to meet you, do you find that they think it's a bit of a stigma?
I think
what encouragement do you give them?
Well, a lot of people with type 1 diabetes certainly find themselves alone because they don't often talk about it to other people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ignorance in the general public about what type 1 diabetes means, but generally people are worried that they might go hypo or do something crazy or whatever, you know, any moment in time. And how are they personally going to handle that in that situation? What do they do? And a lot of people I know with type 1, it's often when they speak to other type 1s, it's the first time they've ever spoken to a type 1 or anyone. So it's a lonely existence, and you sort of live it yourself. So a lot of people with type 1 live it themselves. The other thing I'd say is if you're a parent with a child with type 1, it's very difficult. You know, what if your child wants to go on a sleepover with a friend, and the parents are very comfortable with that? So and it's a matter of educating people to be comfortable with it, and with modern technology, certainly with remote glucose sensors, parents can actually be more in control of their child's diabetes, so it's less of an issue potentially. But there are all those potential problems, and of course with type 2 diabetes, I mean, 75% or more of UK's food is bought in supermarkets, and we know that the nation as a whole is buying what our government recommends we eat, the proportions of the fats, the proteins and the carbohydrates.
Well, that's an educational programme, isn't it, at government level? Surely it must be. They're saying eating, you know, I think people are caught in a bit of a dilemma here, and definitely between the rock and a hard place, because money is tight. People work long hours for their money. They go to a supermarket, processed foods are in there. Very few people read all the stuff on the back and the labels, because quite frankly 90% of the population can't read it, because we don't read script that small. I mean, it's like trying to read terms and conditions of any other agreement. It's just a nonsense. They buy it because it's cheaper.
Absolutely.
Do you think the government or the medical association or something should put pressure on the government to make sure that they don't do this? And because it's better but very expensive to buy beef, for example.
Absolutely.
Hugely expensive.
I mean, yes, I do. I mean, there are moves now to try to limit the accessibility of ultra processed foods, which is most of the food you find at a fuel station or in a convenience store, for example. Yeah. And we're starting to realise that ultra processed food, that the foods that our body doesn't typically recognise as food, and where additives and flavourants and colorants have been added to make that food appealing to us, and sweeteners have been added to appeal to our natural love for sugar. We all like sugar, and you were saying right at the start, you like all the stuff that is not recommended. And sugar is for some people very, very addictive, or certainly you want to eat more of it. And a lot of companies that produce the ultra processed food understand this. Just for example, I've got a friend who used to work for one of these companies, and for example, tortilla chips. She said that what they do is produce different formulations of flavoring for these things and try them out on, say, 1,000 people and work out where the taste is the optimum.
Yeah.
That's called the bliss point. So that's designed into that food. But the bliss point is then ignored, and they take the 90% bliss point, for example.
Sure. So sell as many bags of crisps or whatever that they can.
You start eating a tortilla chip that, I'm nearly there. I've nearly got to my satisfaction, but not quite. And then you just eat more and more and more and more of it.
Yeah.
So there's this manipulation of people's vulnerability to sweet food. I mean, somebody talks about the fact that carbohydrates get converted to fat in our bodies. Excess carbohydrate, if you're not using it for energy. So if you're sitting down, have a Mars bar, have a pizza, watch telly, most of the carbohydrate, the pizza base or the sugar in the Mars bar will get converted to fat. And you know, my mum's generation, they call them fattening foods, carbohydrates. That's what I call fattening foods. And of course, someone says, well, 10,000 years ago, when there's no Tesco's around, you only had carbohydrates or sweet foods, berry fruits or whatever, and oranges and whatever in a short period of time, and you were driven to eat to get yourself fat to get through the winter.
So Rebecca, is there any truth to this thing that fresh fruit and fresh vegetables can be the be all and end all?
That's a tricky question. I think that we need to think about different foods. So fruit and vegetables absolutely can be really helpful and can have their place, but we need to maybe think about the proportions and the types that we're having. So for example, the approach that we've been discussing this evening, we absolutely, encourage people to enjoy non-starchy vegetables, make use of them for their colour, their diversity, the phytonutrients they include. But, thinking about actually some vegetables and fruit can give an awful lot of carbohydrate and then really disrupt blood sugar control. So it depends on, who you are, if you've got type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, but there is absolutely a way to include these things in your diet if you want to. So we talk to people about, what fruits, for example, and things like, Ian was mentioning things like berries, even things like apples and pears. And the interesting thing is, I saw your face, Stuart, but the interesting thing is that once you sort of move to this approach, then these foods taste really sweet. They taste like that sweetness that you used to get from something else, and they taste amazing. It's just sort of your body adapting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely, you can include these things. They can be really helpful, but it's understanding yourself, the impact they have on you and your blood sugar levels and how you feel. And that's what Ian and I are really passionate about, people having the knowledge themselves.
Okay, that's great. We will be back soon. I'll give you another break. Going to play a track here. Now, does anybody want to own up to choosing the next song, which is John Denver and his song?
No, I didn't choose it, but it's a lovely song.
Oh, thank goodness for that, because it was the one I chose, because when Rebecca wanted one from another group, I couldn't find it. We didn't have it on there. So we're going to play a little bit of John Denver. Rebecca, being the lady on the show, would you like to dedicate this to anybody? God, I'm a romantic at heart.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to dedicate this to my husband, Richard, who's not been very well. So dedicating it to him.
Oh, dear. He's not very well.
No, he's had shingles, and shingles is not that nice as an adult. So he's on the way to recovery, but this can help. Okay,
what's his name?
Richard.
Will he be listening?
Yes.
You weren't too sure there, were you? At least you can say you dedicated this to him. So here we go. We'll have this on a short break.
Thank you.
You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Come, let me love you, let me give my life to you. me drown in your laughter. Let me die in your arms. Let me lay down beside you. Let me always be with you. Come, let me love you. Come, love me again. Let me give my life to you. Come, let me love you. Come, love me again. Sing it with me. You fill up my senses like a night in the forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses. Come fill me
There we go. Always welcome if they did a little recording at the end of that song. So that was John Denver, one of my favourites, past artists, unfortunately died in a plane crash many years ago. Okay, so we were, prior to what we were talking about, Ian, I've got a question of you, okay? What could people expect if they join the insulin optimization for type 1 program?
Thank you. Yes, well, I run this at Coombe Grove. It's a 6-day residential program, and it's based around what we were talking about earlier, that the fact that people need to understand intimately how insulin works in their bodies, and need to understand how type 1 diabetes needs to be managed across all of the routes of health. So each of the days we introduce a different concept. So we deal with food, we deal with mindset, we deal with physical activity, we deal with sleep, and we deal with the body rhythms and how to prepare for sleep, and how to understand how our body rhythms work and how insulin impacts upon all of those areas. And I'm assisted really by a team of fellow type 1s who understand how to do this. So we have an expert, Emma Porter, who's an expert on nutrition. We have John Furness, who's an expert on physical activity. We have Vanessa Haydock, who's an expert on mindset and motivation. And we have a couple of non-type 1s who are experts on sleep and circadian rhythms. And then we have two other people, Jane Hall McLean and Suzanne Schneider, who are experts on mental health and how that impacts type 1, and also how mental health and stress impacts insulin. So we teach that throughout the day. We have a retreat which enables people to join in with relaxation practices, swimming and walking out in the country, or doing yoga or whatever they want. And we also have a 2-meal-a-day strategy with suitable foods that we think will help people with type 1 diabetes. It's been very successful so far. We're only 9 weeks from the first program, but already the majority of people are getting into the non-diabetic range. They're improving their diabetes control tremendously, and they're also reducing their insulin volumes and feeling a lot better. One person the other day on the WhatsApp group we run with this group, because it isn't just a 6-day retreat, it goes on for a whole year of follow-up and support for these people. One person's already saying, I can't believe that my diabetes control is the best it's ever been for the last 20 or 30 years. And I said,
that's a positive outcome.
I can, because once you understand how insulin works, you can work with it, and that's the basis of what we do at Coombe Grove.
Yeah, maybe one of the key messages: don't treat it like you've got it. You've got it. no way really of getting rid of it. You've got to treat it not like an enemy, but like a friend, and nurture it, look after it, and the emphasis on yourself to change your lifestyle, change your sleeping and eating habits, take your exercise, and do all the things a normal person should really do. All of us should do it.
Yes, it's one approach, and I'm keen that people get the information. I think we put this out on my website, and Coombe Grove equally promote the idea that the information should be available to all people with type 1 diabetes, and then it's up to you as a person with type 1 to choose how you want to play it. But
is this something that should be taught at a much younger age? Part of a university course or an upper sixth school course?
I've got courses for healthcare professionals, and we're trying to get into supporting through Coombe Grove, through supporting healthcare professionals on shorter courses to let them understand what we're trying to achieve here. But we will, after a year, be getting some results that we can publish, and then obviously that will help us to demonstrate the effectiveness of this approach.
Okay, all right, that's good. Listen, it is that's women as well. Before I get accused of being gender neurotic. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I hope you've enjoyed it. But before we go, there's a couple of things I would like to do. It's been really good having you on it. And believe me, there's no doubt I'm going to be having you back, because this industry and this market and this illness is right at the top of the pile of all illnesses within the UK. I mean, over 4 million people. It's absolutely unbelievable, and I'll be having you back. I'll be also interested, to be completely honest, in having John on board, who was, I know John's a bit of an athlete, does a lot of running, climbing, that kind of stuff. This kind of disease does not mean you have to live completely change life. You just got to look after it and operate within yourselves. Obviously, with your sleep, your well-being, your diet, and all the other things that goes with it. It's pretty good. So I really appreciate you both coming here. Now, what's the best way, right, of people to get hold of either of you?
The best thing to do is to go to Coombe Grove's website, so coombegrove.com, and then you can find all the information about
and the Coombe is spelled
COMBE, and then Grove,
all one word.
Yeah. All one word. So just Google us, look up our website, and you'll find all the information about the programs we run, and you can contact us to find out more. Really happy to have a chat and just, talk about how it might work for you.
That's good. All right. Everything okay with you, Ian? Do you want anything to add? Any last advice or anything else like that?
So my website is dedicated to type 1 and providing information to people about the 5 routes of health. It's all free stuff. There are healthcare professional courses, but it's at type 1 keto, type as in TYPE, number 1, and then keto.com.
Okay. Just excuse my ignorance here, because I know nothing about this. Keto, I hear that a lot. KETO.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's keto?
Ketones are basically ketone bodies. There are 3 different types of ketone bodies, but the shorthand is ketones, and they are the breakdown products of fat. So when your body's access fat burning, the end result of all fat burning is a tiny little remnant on the end. Fats are big long chains, and basically they're chopped up as they provide energy, and the last bit is called a ketone body. And
I was getting slightly confused with some sort of horrible-looking green vegetable you stick on the plate in place of a salad for some obscure reason. Which really fly. I tell you what, this program flies completely in the face of the fact that I'm going to go out and have a kebab and chips. Well, no, I won't do that, because I know that's stupid now, because I'm learning all the time. I'll give the chips a miss. But I'll kebab. Thursday night is kebab night. It's worse than the Big Bang Theory on here, believe me. So, anyway, we've only got a few minutes to go, and I thought I'd play us out, and I do appreciate you being on here, and do stay on here, because after we've cut off and handed the station back to go to normal broadcasting, I want to have just a brief chat with you. Do appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much for your advice. And Ian, what can I say? Thank you for answering questions that I can actually understand the answer.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know about you, Rebecca. I know you're a doctor as well, but you're okay because you're in nutrition. Always confused me why doctors write in Latin. It's because nobody else can understand them. But there you go. I'll never get to one with that.
Ian's a great communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. He came over and listen, as I said, you've definitely got to come back. Okay, I chose the last thing to play us out with. So this is my responsibility and my fault. And I thought it would be quite apt. Spirit in the Sky. I thought I'd do that. I'd do that one. And it's by not people that usually are known for singing this, but it's by a group called Doctor and the Medics. And I thought that would be pretty good, really.
Brilliant.
So it's like play on theme and what is it? Okay, it's very hammy, but we'll get that. Do stay with us. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. Don't forget, if you want any further information or you have a pen and pad handy, do look at our website, which you can get hold of us on, which is the 3 W's, of course, livingwithdiabetes.co.uk, because I can put you in touch with both Ian and Rebecca, and I'll funnel through any information or any requests you want. If that's okay with the two of you?
Absolutely.
That way. Thanks for being with us. We will be live again with another couple of guests exactly a month tonight. That's Thursday, Spectrum on Air. Okay, I hope you're writing this down, my listener, as you're at the other end. Spectrum on Air on a Thursday at 7 o'clock live in the studio. Meanwhile, Spirit in the Sky, stay well. And if you're worried about anything, for God's sake, do something about it and stay in touch. Thanks for listening.